Hi, I'm Corey Nathan, and this is Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. Your home for edifying, provocative, and fun conversations among high-profile public figures and regular folks like me. We talk about faith and politics and all kinds of topics that really matter in our culture. So if you're tired of all the screamers out there taking all the oxygen out of the room and you want to join us in taking some of that space back, you'll love talking politics and religion without killing each other. Thanks for spending some time with us. Enjoy today's show. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are talking politics and religion without killing each other. I am your host, Corey Nathan, and so grateful to have a place to talk about faith and politics and big ideas in our culture with all kinds of interesting, accomplished folks of goodwill in good faith. If you're listening for the first time, thank you. Welcome. And if you dig what we're doing here, hit the subscribe button. If you've been listening for a while, perhaps leave a review if you haven't already, or tell a friend about us. That's the number one way we can grow and include others in these important conversations. Just telling friends, say, hey, listen to that crazy show, www.politicsandreligion.us. And today is a special day. We're doing something a little different. I've invited a couple of my favorite podcast pals, two people I really admire and respect, but don't tell them that. I don't want to get a big head about that. But no, seriously, I really admire both of these folks and love what they're doing. They also happen to be in the same general space that we're in here on TPNR in terms of content and tone. I've invited Lori Adams Brown and Will Wright to discuss the results of the recent election, discuss maybe what some of the things that we got right, what we got wrong, draw some takeaways from the results, and to start to look ahead at the coming legislative session and beyond. But before we get into it, let me just give you a little bit of background on Lori and Will. They've both been on the program before. Will, I think this is actually, is it your third time? You co-hosted when Lisa Sharon Harper was on, right?
That's right. I've got two more before I get my jacket.
There you go. There you go. I think you and Mike Madrid are like my, you have a hat trick. So this is a great honor. It's also cool to hang out with Lori again. I've been on Lori's program. Lori's been here. So Lori Adams Brown is a combination of international speaker, business executive, podcaster, and relief and development expert. She hosts the popular podcast, A World of Difference, celebrating humanity's unique differences and encouraging us all to make a difference around the world. Since growing up in international schools in Costa Rica and Venezuela, Lori has spent her career working in Indonesia, Singapore, and the San Francisco Bay Area. She worked in disaster relief in the 2004 Indonesian tsunami, where she consulted with the UN coordination efforts, and she's spoken to audiences in Singapore, Indonesia, I don't even know how to say that properly. Brunei, thank you. Mm-hmm. Brunei, Thailand, Malaysia, Venezuela, and around the U.S. Lori speaks seventh if you include whatever language I'm speaking right now, and serves on the board of Justice Revival and volunteers to help resettle Afghan refugees in the San Francisco Bay Area. Will Wright has been interested in politics his whole life. He elected not to run for any office because in the third grade, his teacher told him that Black people could never be president. True story.
Aww.
Yeah, seriously. But in 2001, after the World Trade Center towers collapsed, Will felt the need to do something, so he enlisted in the U.S. Army as an infantryman. His unit was one of the initial pushes into the streets of Iraq during Operation Iraqi Freedom. After leaving the service, Will traveled the world as a consultant, which is where he really experienced how the world works and got the idea to start a podcast that centers around faith and politics. His political leanings tend to favor Democratic policies, but he's voted for Democrats, Libertarians, and Republicans. He wishes that problems could be fixed by civil dialogue and hopes his podcast, which is called Faithful Politics, can exemplify what that conversation can look like in the world. Will, Lori, thanks for hanging out with me today. How are you both doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, it's a nice sunny day here in Silicon Valley. Blue skies.
Awesome. Yeah, speaking of Silicon Valley, isn't the world going to end? Like somebody's going to pull the plug or something? What's going on up there?
I don't know. Is it Twitter blue skies? We're not sure what the blue represents. Is it blue for the political party? I really don't know. But yeah, last night, 5 p.m., 5 p.m. last night was when Elon Musk closed the doors of Twitter up in San Francisco. And it's kind of all the buzz around here, what's going to happen with Twitter. But yeah, what do you think, Will? What's happening with Twitter?
Yeah, it's one of those like things where if it does go down, I'm probably not gonna, I don't know, lose my, what crap over it. I don't want to say the S word. I don't know if it's a family.
No, say it. Come on.
I don't want to lose my shit over this,
Early. Yeah.
but I'll probably, I would only have to thank Elon because he's going to give me so many more hours of my life back. So, I'm pretty indifferent about it.
Yeah. I just had a very crass thought. But I will say that my legs fall asleep at certain times. I'm not going to say why when I'm on Twitter, because I just realized time has gone by and I'm still where I am. And, I won't even go into it, why my legs go to sleep, but you can use your imagination.
Yeah, one thing I will say is that if Twitter does go down, people can find me on Craigslist. I have a Faithful Politics Craigslist posting. It's true.
Very creative. Yeah.
I'm on MySpace. You can find me on no, actually I've discovered Mastodon and I'm still, it's like still kind of clunky. I'm still learning it, but it looks kind of cool. It looks like brighter, sunnier, less, whatever. But anyway, I'm checking it out. We'll see what happens with Twitter. I don't think it's going to be the end of the world by any stretch, but
No, but Facebook isn't doing a whole lot better, is it? So whichever blue we're looking at, it's just things aren't looking good.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we're here to talk about some politics, the midterms. So I was curious to start over the course of 2022. Can you track with what your expectations were for the recent, for the recent election? Like, what did you think might happen, say, in January of 22 versus June of 2022 versus, mid to late October of 2022? How was your expectations being shaped over the course of the year?
I think typically whatever party is in the White House, like whoever's president, midterms usually mean the other party is who kind of gains more. And so I think if history was repeating itself, that's sort of what we expect. But January, we were experiencing the January before, kind of in the anniversary of that, and knowing, gosh, it's hard to predict what might happen based on January 6th the year before. So it was really hard to know. And, my experience of being an American overseas most of my life, we often understand Americans have a very short attention span. So you always kind of think what's going to happen right before midterms that's really going to make the big difference. And so in the summer, it was hard to say in June, but certainly when here in San Francisco, in the Bay Area where I live, when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked in his home, that definitely shifted what's going to happen because, there were quite a few Republicans who didn't respond in ways I would hope they would have as humans and as Americans. And I'm pretty sure that was a factor in what people saw immediately before the midterms. Also, the factor of Roe being overturned, I think, was a huge one. Anyway, what did you think, Will?
Yeah, it's weird to sort of like pontificate on like what's going to happen because depending on kind of your party alliance or allegiance, you tend to sort of like there's that little fish that feeds on whales or sharks, I forgot what they're called, but it's like, as politically minded people, we tend to just latch on to what the party's, feelings are about the election. So I think the Republicans really thought that, they're going to have like this red tsunami, this red wave, but there was no red wave, especially on Kerry Lake. That was a joke. A bad one, actually. trying out my new material,
I just caught it.
So with Democrats, like, I think Democrats actually did a pretty good job of tapering expectations. And I think that the fact it was a perfect combination of really bad candidates being pushed out by Trump and the country, sort of trying to come to terms with, the Dobbs decision and abortion. And I think that was sort of like the little sleeper cell that really kind of threw things off because, whether you're looking at 538 polls or one of the other ones, like, I think that there was some indication that Democrats could lose both houses, but they didn't. They managed to keep the Senate, and hopefully they can get a majority when the runoffs happen. So, yeah, I mean, as a Democrat, I feel pretty good about it. I wish we would have kept the House, but now that we didn't, we're just going to have like 2 more years of Benghazi, investigation. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the attack on Speaker Pelosi's husband. I hadn't necessarily tied that together with one of my big takeaways that we'll talk about in a little bit here, but I realized I think that ties into what was more of a factor than a lot of folks were considering. And it's something that Mike Madrid was talking about a lot. It's that voters don't tend to vote for things so much as they vote against things. So a lot of pundits were assessing that there would be a preponderance of voters that were voting against high gas prices, against the Biden agenda, maybe still reacting to what happened over a year ago now with the exiting Afghanistan. I wasn't necessarily buying that. Because my main focus since January 6th has been just that. January 6th, 2021 is tracking with my particular congressman's voting record and what he's been saying publicly. I was watching Bill Kristol's organization started this GOP Democracy Report Card and just saying, look, I don't care what your foreign policy is. I don't care what your immigration policy is. I don't care what your fiscal policy is if we can't agree on democracy itself. So I thought that was much more of, and maybe I kept on checking myself, like, is that just me? Is no one else paying attention to this? Is it really gas prices over and above, our democratic institutions? I will say, though, that all along I was a skeptic about the historical data point that a president's first midterm election there's plenty of historic precedent for going very much against them. But as an old stock operator, I looked at that as what's called one technical data point. It was just a number. And especially if that number had exceptions, which it did as recently as 2002, as well as 1962 and 1930. So it would have been 1936. 1934,
Okay.
That there were exceptions to that rule. And then additionally, I was looking at the fundamentals, like what was actually happening around the rest of the country, what was going on issues wise. Were the fundamentals supporting the technical data point, or were the fundamentals at odds with that technical data point? And I thought the January 6th, very much like 9/11, was one major historical fundamental thing that happened that would create a tension with what's happened historically. So I wasn't a big believer in that. And then we started to see how this thing started to shape up. Number one, when folks who were pulling for not just Democrats, but pro-democracy candidates, they were saying, well, why is this 2022 going to be really, really bad for Democrats? One of the first things that people talked about was redistricting. And when that finally happened, it was essentially Dave Wasserman for the Cook Political Report basically said, hey, it's a wash because, in the 2010 cycle, most Republican, it was a lot of Republican state legislatures that the governing boards that were controlling redistricting on a state by state basis, they maxed out their redistricting, their what is it called? What is it called when they gerrymander? The gerrymandering. They maxed out their gerrymandering opportunities. So it basically turned out to be a wash. So that was one big thing. I did think once we got past Afghanistan that and Biden's poll numbers took a big hit. I did think that was significant and that it wouldn't be good in the Democrats' favor. But then as the year started to progress, 2022 started to progress, and there were other signs in the economy. Unemployment kept on coming down. Inflation was bad, but then inflation started to ease by the summer. We started to see that in the gas prices over the summer. And then, I think, Will, did you say it, or Lori, did you mention the Dobbs decision?
Yeah.
Once the Dobbs decision was official, I saw in a certain part of the electorate an enthusiasm, a passion that I hadn't seen since early 2017, since the Me Too movement. Basically, I saw a lot of similarities there, but specifically where I was seeing it was in a key part of the electorate, and that is suburban, college-educated women. So what moves the election aren't the folks that are the extremists, the folks who just vote D all the time or R all the time. What moves it are certain parts of the electorate. Mike Madrid was talking about the Democrats losing some Latino voters and leaking parts, significant segments of the Latino vote. So if any particular Democratic candidate could stop the leaking, could stop that in terms of Latino votes, but also sway and persuade college-educated suburban women, then that would move the needle a little bit. So those were my kind of evolving expectations of the election. But sorry, I feel like I've monopolized this section more than I should have.
No, one thing I'll say though, Corey, is that the things that you pointed out are pretty important things, and I think that whether the electorate knows it or not, I think the electorate votes with their amygdala. And like we tend to remember.
Is that the lizard brain? Is that the lizard?
It's the one like when things are going really crappy.
Okay.
So like people remember January 6th because like, I mean, it like you said, it's like 9/11 or the Challenger blowing up or however old you are and the big thing that happened, like there's a connection that, makes us remember that and assign blame. And I think even with like the Dobbs decision, like for a lot of people, they're just like, no. So I always tend to be, cognizant of like, what are the things that are stimulating people's amygdala? And that's the thing people are going to vote for or against in the election.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah. That's why fear motivates, right? I mean, I studied this in sociology back in my undergrad. If you can give people a fear, whether it's in marketing or politics or religion, or in the case of this podcast, both religion and politics, wow, you get votes. Like it's just the age-old tale of how our amygdalas work. And so it's like, are you afraid of people murdering babies? Well, then let's vote that way. But Dobbs got overturned. So if now that's resolved for the white evangelicals who were voting that way, supposedly this one issue voter kind of community, it's like, okay, that's done. So now what's your next thing?
Yeah.
And it was kind of a wild card as to what that would be. Are they going to vote based more on immigration? But that wasn't really front and center during the midterms. So that's why I think maybe even the Pelosi situation was something to be afraid of. Wait, they can come in our homes and attack our spouses, like, and then when it happens, they can blame them somehow, like it's their fault because of their politics. Like, whoa, what in the world is happening here? So for some of the swing voters, it may have been a factor. I don't know that we have the data to show it yet, but anecdotally, there's some indication it may have been a factor.
Well, there are certain pieces of data. I mentioned Mike Madrid earlier. He was saying the standard, which would you vote for, a Democrat or a Republican for your House district? That's a generic poll, and it's not very useful. He said also too much emphasis was being placed on Biden's approval numbers. What was underappreciated was this poll that was being taken. Which party do you find more extreme? And by far, the Republicans were found to be more extreme. So tying into that point about people vote against things, people vote for, against what they're afraid of, that incident, and specifically how many Republicans responded to Speaker Pelosi's husband being attacked, that was reinforcing, these guys are nuts. So like posting a Twitter thing with a hammer and underwear. What are you talking about? This guy was brutally attacked. Where's your humanity, for goodness sake? So I do think that if nothing else, it was reinforcing a fear of the extremities that many in the Republican Party have gone. Were there any particular races that you were tracking with leading up to the election, like specific races that you were following more closely? Will?
Yeah. So I mean, I was fortunate enough to have both of the Congress people running in my district. So I'm in Virginia, and I'm in the 7th district. So Donald McEachin is the Democrat. He's the incumbent. And then Leon Benjamin was the very Trumpian contender. He was even like part of sort of Trump's, like, I don't know, like faith council or something like that. And he was endorsed by Michael Flynn. So he was a lot of fun to talk to, like, so I was watching that one, but I wasn't too concerned. I think even though like I live, so the state district I live in is the same state district as Amanda Chase. And if you don't know who she is, like, she calls herself Trump in heels. So that should tell you everything you need to know.
Wow.
Like, this is my...
That's kind of a weird picture.
Yeah,
it is very weird. Yeah.
I didn't have it until you just said that.
It's
Thank
like
you.
Trans Awareness Week. Hopefully that's not what we're trying to go with.
Yeah. So I was watching, my own local race, because I just did not want to have a Trumpian candidate, although, my conversation with them was cordial. I mean, I bit my tongue a lot. But the other race I was following here was the Yesli Vega and the Abigail Spanberger race. And there's kind of an interesting note there, is that, so Spanberger is the incumbent. She's up in the, I think
it's Virginia too.
Yeah. Second congressional district. And I made a mistake. I'm in the 4th district. God, it's too late. It's 4th or 7th. Don't fact check me. But the Abigail Spanberger race was interesting because she's a Democrat, but she's pretty moderate. And Yesli Vega, her opponent, isn't 100% Trumpy, but like just Trumpy adjacent. And Spanberger was able to hold her seat. And actually, and here's the funny thing, is that for a person that likes to consider himself pretty politically informed, like, we try to get Abigail Spanberger on the show because I had thought she was the representative for my co-host, Pastor Josh, and she would have been, because this was the first election after redistricting occurred. So she had always been his like representative. And even if you go to like to congress.gov and look her up and you put in your zip code, it's like, oh yeah, Josh, you're in Spanberger's, district. And it wasn't until like voting day that Josh calls me. He's like, yeah, there was some other guy on there named Whitman, like, I don't even know who this guy is, and I'm like, what the heck? and then went on to the Virginia website to realize, oh, so he's in a completely different district now. And I didn't know that. I mean, I don't typically tend to follow his representatives, but, he had asked me, hey, who should I vote for? And I'm a Democrat and he's a Republican. So I was like, yeah, you should vote for Spanberger. She's a Republican, But yeah, so I can't help but think how much redistricting played a role in people's vote. People just going to the polls on voting day and be like, huh? Like,
who's this? Yeah.
Like, all right, I guess I'll vote for this person,
Right. Right.
So yeah, really interesting.
So just technicality, Abigail Spanberger is Virginia 7.
Oh, okay. So I had it backwards. Okay. Yeah. So I'm in the 4th. She's in the 7th.
Right. What about you, Lori? Were there any particular races?
Here in California, some things are pretty predictable. Even though we have exciting politics, we're a very large state. I really was more looking at other places like Georgia. Like, to be honest, still up for grabs, right? But I mean, it's just when I vote, I think of character and I think of morality, and I have international politics in mind, but I also want to know who that person is in their everyday life, and are they congruent? And that's hard to do in politics, I know, but I don't know. Herschel Walker was just like a very huge surprise in terms of how close it is, especially being a Republican, supposedly pro-life candidate. I mean, the stories about him forcing women to have abortions. One woman who drove because he said, go have an abortion. She went and couldn't do it. And then he's like, I'll take you. It's very... I find it troubling, the lack of consent in his relationships. Now, I understand. I've seen the movie Concussion. I have serious concerns around maybe what happened in his athletic career and things like that. And so there is a level of like sadness. But do I want him in our Senate? No, I don't. And I find it very ironic that pro-life Republicans are voting for him. But then again, I'm an ever Trumper. So Not a recent Humpty Dumpty, not Trump, but like never Trumper from the beginning. And so I've always found it inconsistent that he was a pro-life candidate when he has had so many women, and we don't know his history around abortion, honestly, except that he used to be pro-choice and then flipped. It seems as though, from my perspective, maybe to get the votes of the white evangelicals. I don't know. And obviously, if you've seen the horrible documentary, God forbid, about Liberty University, or listen to Gangster Capitalism podcast, you recognize even with Trump, there was a lot of, we're talking politics and religion here, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that Jerry Falwell Jr. could actually help Trump win the presidency by endorsing him at the largest Christian university in the world, and be living such an immoral lifestyle with the pool boy and all that going on. And, I also follow on Twitter, hopefully it'll stay around, many of the survivors of sexual assault on Liberty University's campus. So there's just a lot of immorality in politics. It always has been, but because we have abilities to know more about people, a candidate like Herschel Walker, I have serious concerns, and I find it very incongruent for people who are pro-life to vote for him.
I have a question, because since you brought up God forbid, and FYI, like, I interviewed the director of that movie for this week's podcast, actually. Billy
I'll
Corben.
check it out.
Yeah, really cool guy. And
faithful politics, folks. Faithful politics.
That's right.
and it is a phenomenal like documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's on Hulu. And one of the things I told him about his documentary, why I think it's resonating so much with sort of like the evangelical political class, is that there aren't a lot of documentaries that sort of tie like evangelical support to like Republicans or Trump in general. And I think it's probably one of the only ones that I've seen that does it really, really well and kind of tells a good story. But after the interview, one of the questions that kept coming back to me is like, how, okay, if the Falwells and Liberty played such a humongous role at garnering, sort of the white evangelical vote, but now Falwell's out of the picture. And I'm fairly certain that Liberty's not going to want to like invite Trump back, So like, what I'm curious to get both your thoughts on like how do they get that support when the world's largest Christian organization is no longer like promoting, these Republicans? What do you guys think?
It could go so many different ways. I mean, we're seeing people who did support Trump all of a sudden, now that this midterm went a different way, people he was supporting, now they're suddenly like pulling back. Even SNL's skit on Saturday night was like about how like on Fox and Friends, they're like, Trump, don't make any announcement. Please don't call in. Just stay at your daughter's wedding. Like, what? No, everybody's afraid he's going to announce he's running for president because people are kind of pulling back from him. Now he's not considered the winner anymore, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I think there's a lot that's unpredictable around this. Things can change on a dime in American politics, and however the news cycle goes might be a factor. I don't know. What do you think, Corey?
So we're speaking of a couple of intertwined, braided institutions, if you will. One is the Republican Party and one is the church. And I think that we do see the early signs of other institutions rejecting Trump. I thought like a major sort of troll was it the Wall Street Journal or was it one of other Murdoch's other papers that put it on like the 26th page? Florida man announces for president.
Oh wow! I missed that.
Yeah, they didn't put it on the front page, let alone the second, third, or fourth. It was literally the 26th, bottom half. Florida man announces for president. So you see some rejection of Trump. You see a lot of folks who up until last Tuesday were really hanging on to that Titanic and playing in the little mini orchestra while it was sinking. But there's something else. There's this persistent disposition that I think is really at the heart of a disease, in particular in the church. And that is the true north is defined by the enemy, by the supposed enemy. Yeah. It's this delusion that everything else sort of configures around. And this imagined enemy is the left or the never Trumpers or the rhinos or the whatevers, and I recognized it maybe because I was an outsider coming into the church at a relatively later age. But I recognized it in the early 2000s. I recognized it in the mid 2000s when my kids started going to a Christian school, and I got a Christian education school's newsletter that started out with the left wants you to, the left is trying to, and I'm like,
wow.
Am I reading like bullet points from whoever, Sean Hannity's program or Rush Limbaugh's program, or am I reading my kid's school newspaper, like a newsletter or something? So I think that a lot can be justified, or a lot of augmentations of thought and theology have bent around this defining principle of hating the left and this fear of the left and this idea of being an aggrieved minority. So that's one thing. So until the church reckons with that defining principle, I just think we're going to see the same disease, maybe with a few different symptoms or a few different, leaders or preferred folks that the church is rooting for. In the Republican Party, I think there's something similar. I think that the GOP is not going to be the GOP unless it has a huge reckoning with the fact that the crazies have taken over the whole party. It used to be a healthy fight, a healthy debate between some extremists, the John Birch Society, and some principled conservatives, some folks who, for philosophical, principled reasons, felt that, oversimplifying, but smaller government, having a strong presence overseas, whether you agree with that stuff or not, it was coming from a well thought through set of ideas. But they've lost the argument. They are now seen as part of the enemy, if not an even worse enemy than the Democrats. So until some of these fundamental things are reckoned with, I think it's going to be the other big factor is that I mentioned that Fox News and Murdoch's other, the newspapers and what have you, you're starting to see a rejection of Trump. There's something related there where Christians will sooner rid themselves of their scripturally based principles in deference to, well, we got an enemy to fight. So, this Trump guy, he's fighting for us. And, they'll do away with all sense of the fruit of the spirit because it's in service of fighting the supposed enemy. Media entities will dispense with the principles of good journalism if it's in service of fighting that same enemy. So I think regardless of whether Fox News decides that Trump's their boy or not, until there's a commitment to shared values of what good journalism is, and we can argue about whose preferences, Rachel Maddow, and, she's so this, she's so that, but, we understand that she's commentary and there's a certain commitment to having consistency and truth there. So I'm not a fan of Rachel Maddow. I'm just saying that you can't necessarily make a direct comparison between her and what Tucker Carlson is doing on a nightly basis. There's no commitment to any truth there. So the documentarian that you're referring to, I haven't seen the documentary, but I'm guessing that, you can't even put him and someone like Dinesh D'Souza in the same breath, which I just did, I guess. But but because D'Souza has an objective, and that objective is to vilify, mischaracterize, raise heat, and frankly, make a ton of money. So that his objective is not to explore some difficult truth. His objective is to just to get attention so that he can sell more stuff and make more money. So anyway, I think the bottom line is, again, a long way around the barn. Sorry, guys. A long way around the barn of saying there are these underlying problems that even if Fox News rejects Trump going forward, we got to address, or the church starts to adopt somebody else, whether it's DeSantis or somebody else. There are these underlying problems that unless they are reckoned with, nothing else is changing. So.
Yeah, the system's broken. And if you don't address the system, the next guy may not be exactly like Trump, but will look a lot like, there will be some similar elements that system wants to have. So, my friend, Dr. Kristen Kobes-Dumay, and her book, Jesus and John Wayne, I mean, that was, it's a book for the ages, right? She has documented very well Trump was what white evangelicals wanted. And if that's what white evangelicals wanted, even though they're dumping Trump, they still want, it's like the mega church pastor that gets, fired for abuse, but the system is the same and they get another one that's similar. or it's like a nation that has, issues and their politics and their government, and they get rid of that dictator, and then the next person is the same. You have to change the system or you're going to get the same over and over again. And that's like insanity.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's so frustrating. I know what you're talking about. I'm just still tracking with what's going down in Orange County.
I called Kristen Dumais a superwoman when I interviewed her.
She's awesome.
Because I told her that her book was like really, really life-changing. I can't say enough good things about that book. It's a much easier book for me to push to like get people to read versus like, so we interviewed this other lady named Anthea Butler, Dr. Butler. And her book, White Evangelical Racism, is a much harder book to push to your white evangelical friends, surprisingly.
Wow, shocking.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So, I can't believe how, like, I have so many more, but we're just diving so deep into each of these questions. So let me just bring it back to politics, going back to the big picture. What did you learn about where the electorate is at? Like, do you have any big takeaways about the meaning of the results as we know them so far?
I guess I'll go first. So we learned Trump's endorsements don't really mean much. So if you follow him on Truth Social, I apologize. But
you do, so we don't have to.
Thanks, Will. You taking one for the team.
But he's sort of touting like this really, really awesome record, which I mean, to some degree, like his endorsements, about 86% of his endorsements make it kind of to the next phase. Now, so and that's significant, but where it really matters is in the battleground elections. Him endorsing a Republican in a district that like historically leans Republican isn't necessarily like, magic or anything like that. Where it really matters is like in those battleground states. In those battleground states, he has a success rate of about 38%. So, I mean, that
38% in the general or 38% in the primary?
38% in the general.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that really kind of tells a story of like, okay, when people are looking at their ballots on actual like general election day, and they're looking at, election denier or Democrat, people are choosing the Democrat over the election denier, regardless if they believe in their policies or not. And I think that really kind of sends a strong message to folks like Fox or to folks like, National Review wrote a really interesting article about Trump's announcement recently that's just titled No.
Nope.
Trump is already like, truthing about it today. So I think that, folks on the Republican side of the House are looking like, whoa, like his endorsements are actually doing us harm. Like it's not even 50-50. It's like 30%. I mean, that's like a F++, So I think that gives me a little bit of hope that the electorate is smarter than I think we give it credit for. And that when the fit hits the shan, then
say it. Shit.
Corey's forcing you to curse again.
Yes.
then people really want to have like a working democracy. We want to be able to go to another country and not be ridiculed like we were when Trump was in office. I mean, like I consider myself fairly worldly travel. I mean, I met my wife in South Korea, so I know just traveling, Americans have a certain level of, I don't want to say prestige, but just people just, oh, you're American, there's a certain sort of curiosity about it. And I didn't travel internationally when Trump was president, thank goodness. But friends of mine that did are just like, yeah, they kind of look at you like with a stink eye, like, oh, you're one of those Americans, So I really think that the electorate is wise, and for the lack of a better word, they're much more woke than Republicans think.
Interesting.
I echo that. I was glad. I was relieved as someone who I was living in Singapore in 2016 when we were choosing between, well, unless you voted third party or independent, if you were voting along the US typical, two-party system, your choices were Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And I voted for Hillary Clinton at the US Embassy in Singapore, not because I was against Trump, but because I wanted her. And yeah, it was all the things, as you can imagine. But what it also especially was over the next couple of years of living there was anytime I ran into a new person, especially in the more Muslim area of Singapore, which I often went to, the Malay market, food's good, the people are friendly, and just chit chat with shop owners. And they would find out, I speak Malay, but obviously I'm not Malay. And so it's like, oh, where are you from? And I'd be like, America. And almost every time they would say Trump.
Yeah.
And I began to realize what they're asking is, do you hate me as a Muslim? Like that was the reading the air that Asians often do in Asian languages. And I just began to always say, look, I didn't vote for him, but even among those who did, we don't all hate you. I certainly don't hate you. I love you. I've learned your language. I love your culture. I love your food. But that's the thing we carried as Americans, taxi drivers, not just in Singapore, but all around Southeast Asia. When they found out I was American, almost always, especially Muslims in Southeast Asia, would want to know.
Like Sadiqi,
Yeah, right.
Friends.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's tough, right? Because the US is a democracy. And so they know we vote for these presidents. And so the assumption is if you got this guy who's saying awful things about our country, our people, obviously being from the military, you understand that even the wars we go into, they assume all Americans support that particular war. And so it can be hard overseas. There is a prestige as an American, but there's also a fear and a lack of respect in some ways. And I think that we saw that really tank in the Trump years, the respect for Americans. And that's been the case politically, right? The unilateral decisions he was making, the climate change decisions that were affecting so many nations. And we did lose a lot of respect, even during COVID with other countries around how that was handled. So,
yeah. You both have me thinking that a lot of Republican candidates fell into one of two buckets. One bucket would be the attempt to mimic the anti-virtues of Trump, the brazenness, the greed, the pridefulness, the malice, and all of these other things. We can go through the fruit of the spirit as Christians and say, wow, like he's the exact opposite. And there were so many candidates who were embracing every one of those anti-virtues. So certain candidates fell into that and tried to do their own version of it. And then a lot of other Republicans fell into the problem of cowardice, that they could not find their own voice and say, no, I believe in these things in terms of classical conservatism, but I do not believe in these anti-virtues. So it was either trying to be little Trumps or just being complete cowards and you're voting exactly like my own representative, Mike Garcia, voting exactly like Kevin McCarthy wanted him to. Frankly, voting exactly like people who tried to overturn the election. Insurrectionists wanted him to. Wow. It's a unique form of cowardice. So big takeaways from the election. It started early on. You mentioned Georgia, Lori, and I was encouraged to see that Kemp and Raffensperger and other I wouldn't call them anti-Trump, but they were the bulwarks for democracy in Georgia. They were Republicans who bucked what Trump wanted them to do, and they were the bulwarks for democracy. They were pro-democracy Republicans. I was really encouraged to see them win in their primaries and then win decisively in the generals as non-Trump Republicans. I was encouraged to see governors like Sununu in New Hampshire and DeWine in Ohio had much, much, much better nights than pro-Trump Republicans, especially like a Trump wannabe Republican like Kari Lake in Arizona. Oh my goodness. So it was the first time that I was watching other states' AG and Secretary of State races, and like, this person is still denying the election, and they could overturn the election in Arizona in particular, a swing state. So I was really, really encouraged to see once we got past there were a few key primary races where anti-Trump Republicans won their primaries, but mostly, to your point, Will, 80% of pro-Trump Republicans won in their primaries. A lot of them were rejected in the generals.
Yeah, the Republicans are sending wolves and vampires and fake cops.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard Herschel Walker's last
oh my God. I had to turn it off after a while. Like, where's this going?
Yeah, what is he even saying? Right.
What are we talking about?
Like, have you even seen Twilight? I mean, really? Like,
Crazy
come on,
stuff.
man.
Yeah. Come on, man.
You know, one thing I will say about this this most recent election that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about is that so Democrats had about 14 Senate seats on the line. Some were easier to win than others, and the Republicans had a lot more Senate seats up for grabs. Now, in 6 years from now, the Republican are
the map's not in Democrats' favor in 2024 in the Senate.
Yeah, and there's like so in the what they call like the class 1 senators, there's like 22-ish seats up for grabs, which as a Democrat makes me a little nervous because I'm just thinking whoever the next president is, and I'm hoping it's a Democrat, like at least they'll have their Senate. So my bit of optimism is that the Republicans are going to spend the next 2 years, investigating Hunter Biden and Merrick Garland.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Trying to like elect the first black female president by impeaching Biden. Which I'm okay with. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, hey, I'm part of the Progressive Party, right? So it's like, hey, however we can get it, we'll get it.
Yeah, totally.
So
just a quick response to that, Will. A look ahead. I do think the math and the map is not in Democrats' favor in the Senate for 2024, but that's why 2022 was so significant that the Democrats held at least 50, maybe 51. I believe that Georgia is going again in Warnock's favor, so it'll be 51. So a pickup of 1. That's why it was significant, because if it was truly a red wave, and let's say it was 52 or 53 seats in Republicans' favor, there's a decent chance, not a likelihood necessarily, but a decent chance that 2024, because the map is so bad for Democrats, would have been 60, a filibuster-proof majority for Republicans in 2024. So that would have been interesting to track. But we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here. But looking ahead at just the next legislative session, there are a couple announcements that happened almost simultaneously. One was the presser that Representatives Jim Jordan and James Comer held. They're the presumptive heads of the House Judiciary and Oversight Committees, respectively. But we'll get to that in a second. Another announcement was from Speaker Nancy Pelosi. But Lori, why don't you take that?
I'm just going to say the obvious. I'm a woman. And as a woman, to hear Pelosi's speech yesterday, it just meant a lot. There was a historical moment of this woman who's led us, she's been controversial, obviously, but she's also done some pretty incredible things. And she's been around, and not only is she a woman in her 80s, leading so well, in my perspective, through so many difficult things and paying such a price. We've already mentioned her husband being attacked here in San Francisco in his own home. And I can only imagine the guilt that was meant for her. And it was, toward him. Walking through all that with such strength and dignity and, just the speech yesterday, I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but I highly recommend anyone to watch it, because I don't get really sappy as an American because I grew up overseas. I didn't grow up with a lot of the nationalism around it. But I would just say her story of being a child and seeing the Capitol building for the first time and just what that meant. And then now she's a woman in her 80s and having led, she mentioned how in 1987, there were 12 Democratic women. And now there's 90. And that's a significant change. And she looked around the room and said, this didn't really reflect Americans when I first came in. And it still fully doesn't. But, you just see much more diversity in the House of Representatives right now and the Congress as a whole. And so, I think it was just a really important moment to honor her and what she's done, the price that she's had to pay that no one should have to pay. And it's sad for her to step down, but I guess this replacement situation is giving hope for the new generation. She is, like I said, a woman in her 80s, but it is time for the next generation to sort of take over. And so a lot of good things I'm reading about Hakeem Jeffries and his opportunity that lies there. And I'm excited to see what that could be. I would say I'm still disappointed, like I said, as a woman, that we didn't pass the ERA under her. It's been 50 years. This is something that Abigail Adams told her husband, John, remember the ladies in the Constitution. And I don't know if he just didn't, or he was one of those, like you mentioned, Corey, cowards that didn't say what he should have said. Who knows what went on in that room, but we did not get enshrined in the Constitution. And it's 2022 and women still don't have equal rights. But I do hope, and I'm a part of this board justice revival, and we are hoping to get people of faith around the ERA. So hashtag faith for ERA, or visit justicerevival.org and check out what we're trying to do in the next month and a half, and definitely in the next 6 months, to try to get the White House. There's options out there. It could be Congress, it could be the White House. We need equal rights for women in our Constitution. And I really hope that even if Nancy Pelosi couldn't see it get done, whoever takes the mantle after her will help us get there.
What's that hashtag again, Lori?
Hashtag faith for number 4 ERA.
I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, thanks. justicerevival.org.
Yeah, I just thought it was like, I mean, like I share your sentiment about Pelosi. I wish we had a Pelosi in the Senate side of the House.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was like she was a total boss during the January 6th things. Like when they're showing the footage and she's just like, she's making calls, she's doing things, she's swinging hammers.
Whipping the thing with her teeth,
like,
and
and it's just like, she's like, yeah, I just got off the phone with Mike Pence. And then Schumer's like, I talked to Kamala Harris. like, come on, Schumer, get your act together. It's kind of like that scene in Airplane where they're like, grabbing the people and they're smacking them and there's like a whole line, right. Like I'm just thinking like Pelosi was just, she was in beast mode. She was basically taking charge, and it was just awesome to see that. And, God forbid we ever, have to deal with another assault on the Capitol. But if we did, I'd like to have somebody like Pelosi there to sort of, take the reins and get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. Regardless of whether you agreed with all of her policies or not, no one who's a student of the House and Congress more generally can argue with the fact that she has been one of the most effective leaders in the history of that chamber. And a lot of respect there. Two-time speaker, and her resilience, life and politically. So a lot of respect there. So.
And I'll say one more thing. And in fairness, like I would probably say the same thing about Mitch McConnell. I can't stand the guy.
15 years. Yeah.
He doesn't look happy.
but that dude gets stuff done for the Republicans.
He does.
Even if it's stuff I hate, like, him holding that Obama nomination, like, it still irks me, but like you have to respect the game, and just the, I don't know what you call it, the cojones or whatever, of the guy willing to make that sort of gamble and it paying off. And now they've got like, 6-3 majority. So.
Yeah. So you already alluded to this, Will, but in terms of what'll be happening in the House, any thoughts on Representatives Jordan and Comer's announcement? They'll basically be doing Hunter's laptop palooza all day, every day for the next couple of years.
Yeah. It's one of, like, here's where I stand on Hunter. If he's done some shady stuff, sure, let's investigate it. I voted for Biden. I'm not necessarily on the Biden train, but He's a Democrat, and I don't think he's destroying the country as much as, they may be saying he is. But if his son did some shady stuff, yeah, we should investigate it, because I'm all for like getting rid of corruption. It's like the whole trading stock act that Abigail Spanberger has been pushing for Congress members to not be trading stocks. So I think if they, kind of like I said at the top, do like a Benghazi 2.0, I really think that will work in the Democrats' favor in 2024, because people are going to be like, like the only investigation I've heard announced so far that I have somewhat of an interest in is Rand Paul's investigation on COVID. Like he likes to battle, Fauci and whatnot, and I'm just like, it doesn't really bother me one way or another, but I do think that's a legitimate investigation that needs to happen. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that most Americans would probably support,
Yeah.
assuming it doesn't get too, crazy and, the eye doctor thinks he's smarter than Fauci. So.
Well, what do you think, Laura? Do you have any thoughts about Hunter's laptop or any of the various and sundry investigations they're going to be doing?
Yeah, I'm one of those, the truth sets us free. And if we do it in a way that our judicial system allows us to do it well, and I do think our judicial system overall is good, there are flaws. There are many flaws. Like you talk to any sexual assault victim in the United States that survived that, and our process is not great for them to have to be the one with the burden of proof on them when they were the one assaulted. However, in cases like this, I think generally speaking, we do a pretty decent job, assuming we don't get too much into like I said, we have a level of corruption in our government. Are we on the level of Indonesia? No, but we're not probably as clean as like Singapore. I've lived in both of those countries. So, but I do think the truth sets us free. So in the, I guess Americans will want to know the truth, and we deserve to know the truth because we're a democracy. And it's kind of what we're founded on, is that. And so every person who wants to vote should know, is there something there? Now, these fake things like in the news that often get thrown out there, if we're trying to investigate something that's clearly not an issue, like Hillary Clinton and pizza parlors or whatever, Pizzagate, like, please no. But this, I think, deserves an investigation. We want to know the truth, and it's like you open the windows of the house, let the sun shine in, it will bleach the, fungus or whatever is there, like clean it out. We want to know, we want a clean house, especially if somebody's going to be in the White House. That needs to be very,
I heard sunlight actually is a good disinfectant for COVID. So
yes,
I'm
that's
with
right.
you there.
Clorox. That's a good, yeah.
Inject it. Yes,
Right.
please inject it.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear your openness to these investigations. I meet it with more of an eye roll.
Okay.
But I know it's going to happen. So we just have to get used to it. I think that you're correct, Will, in your projection that this is going to work more against the Republicans in the big picture if they do it in excess, which they inevitably will. But I am more interested sociologically in the effect of all of these investigations. So my first thought was like, oh, so now we're concerned about self-dealing and the president's families. Like, oh, we're concerned about that now. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So just sociologically, some of my friends who are like hardcore Trump fans or anti-Democrats or anti-Trump, like whatever. I'm curious to see how they kind of turn on their heels. Now all of a sudden they really want to know, well, is the president's family corrupt? And I'm curious about it. But more specifically, it doesn't matter because those guys are going to vote for whoever. They'd vote for Satan if Satan had a Republican moniker. What I am curious about, the way I've been putting it recently is my Bible study, my Sunday school class at Grace Baptist Church there were anywhere from 20 to 30 people there on any given, we went on Saturday nights when we were going to that class, 20 to 30 people there. So let's say there's 30 people there, just for argument's sake. 28 people ain't changing their votes, but there's one or two people who are really paying attention.
Yeah.
I want to know, are those folks persuaded? Is the discovery of Hunter doing coke with whoever that's discovered on his laptop, is that going to affect their vote, how they vote in 2024 for California 27's House district? That's what I want to know.
It may.
Yeah. Well, I would say that if one of the other points I didn't make earlier was that their investigation into Hunter is going to not only help Democrats, but it's also going to hurt Trump.
Why do you say that?
Because anybody that's been following politics will look at this investigation and try to make these ties to Hunter and Biden, and then, realize that, hey, what about like Jared Kushner? What about Ivanka Trump? What about, all these self-dealings, such as, even there was like an article.
That's what I was referring to before. Yeah. Like now all of a sudden we're concerned about that stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I forget it was in the Washington Post or where I read it, but where there was like $750,000 of like foreign money that was being poured into the Trump Hotel in DC.
Yeah.
Like
I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah.
and it's just like, okay, I'll play this game because
Right.
I think it's like I'm with you, Lori. I'm like, hey, I'm all about transparency, So hey, like once we're done to Hunter, like let's look at these guys over here, because
Yeah.
I think it's worth doing. And what's frustrating to me is, one, I mean, as a Democrat, like Democrats are really bad at politics. And they won't necessarily, carpe diem the way that I think they should, so mind you, if these Hunter Biden investigations are going on, running parallel to that is also going to be the just announced special counsel investigation that Merrick Garland just announced with the Trump investigation for January 6th and the confidential documents that he had at Mar-a-Lago. So now, albeit Congress and those members will probably be much more vocal, and they're going to do everything they can to sort of like minimize the damage, because the special counsel is probably going to find some stuff and probably going to, put forth like their recommendations for indictment and prosecution, what have you. And, the play here would be, which one is going to capture or garner the most attention for the voters, something that's about like Hunter Biden that has no direct correlation, or this guy who used to be the president that had all these classified documents at his place,
like our documents. He took work home, right?
Yeah, like a guy that never reads, like is all of a sudden owning all these thousands of pages of stuff that he's probably never going to read, So yeah, I mean, I really feel good about 2024. Because of all of that, but it's tapered because you never really know. I mean, anything could happen. So,
yeah.
Since you brought it up, we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss Donald J. Trump's. I call him Donald frickin' Trump. So Donald F. Trump's announcement that he'll be running for president for a third time. So first, any impressions of the speech itself, or did any of us actually watch any of it?
I watched it. I watched it on Rumble.
You did, but like Truth Social, you did, so we don't have to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, what were your thoughts about the speech?
Well, it's funny. It's like so before I watched it on Rumble, I mean, again, like I do have a Truth Social account. I don't advise anybody to follow me because I rarely post on there, but I use it. It's like my smut account for social media. And I follow all kinds of QAnon stuff. I follow, the Dinesh D'Souza's, the Alexander, I can't remember the guy's name that did the Stop the Steal. Anyways, I follow all these crazy accounts to include Trump. And there is a lot of talk kind of within the QAnon circles about, this is it. He's going to announce, like Clinton's at Guantanamo, or somebody posted, this is an account that Trump has retruthed before. This person posted, there's 17 flags behind the podium. There wasn't, there was like 18 or 20 or something, but 17 is like the 17th letter in the alphabet is Q. So they're like, he's signaling something. This is going to be it, like, and so the hype leading up to it was almost as exciting as his speech, which wasn't very exciting at all. It's only important to point out that it wasn't exciting because he himself has used that as a barometer for his popularity. But I mean, his daughter wasn't there, Don Jr. wasn't there. I don't even know Melania was there, but so to take that for what it's worth, Ivanka put out a statement during his like announcement that I'm not going to be involved in my father's presidential campaign, like during the time he's given it,
Wow.
So talk about like, oh God, pain. But he came out, he sort of like did, a lot of the top 20 hits, that he normally does, so much so that like even the crazy stuff he said in it didn't even really resonate or make it in the news. Like he said he wants to, execute drug dealers. Basically anybody that's prosecuted for drugs, like they should die. Like that didn't even make like breaking news on my phone,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that really says a lot, and I think that sort of the low energy of his announcement is going to be really, really indicative. And there were people there that were trying to leave, and his security guard kept him from leaving, which is, it's almost like it's an allegory for how
Welcome
America
to the
was.
Hotel Mar-a-Lago.
It was like, that's how I felt during the last 4 years. I wanted to leave.
Let me leave.
All of us are Mar-a-Lago now,
Yeah. So that was sounds like it was a rather flaccid appearance from Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the fact itself that its disgraced ex-president is running yet again? Any thoughts about that? Oh, I mean, if you want to make any projections or just any general observations, any general thoughts before we move on? Hopefully, we'll move on.
I think that there will probably be a lot of Democrats voting in the Republican primary.
Yeah,
is what I suspect.
That's interesting. Well, especially if Biden decides to run again. The field will be fairly clear for him. So Democrats and independents will be free to vote in the Republican primaries.
Yeah, which, I mean, like, I'm not necessarily, I don't necessarily think Biden should run again. This is me personally, because I think, there's a lot of other contenders out there that I've heard, the least of which is like my own Senator Tim Kaine, which I think he'd be a phenomenal president.
I'm a Mayor Pete fan myself. So.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like I'm sure Lori he's a fellow polyglot,
Nice.
So
You like that in the White House? Yes.
Yeah.
So like I think from a strategic point of view, Biden should run, although I really wish we had somebody different to vote for. So
Yeah. Any thoughts on the announcement or the possibility of Trump running again, or looking ahead to the next presidential election?
I feel like a lot of people have been expressing, oh, I'm so bored if it's Trump and Biden again. And it may have a low voter turnout, maybe, if that's the case. But wouldn't it be nice to be excited about someone, really excited, somebody with character, somebody who really is taking us to the next level. America needs to redeem itself. And I think Biden has to an extent, but he's not extreme. And he's definitely taken us to new levels from what Trump had taken us into in terms of climate change. And for, me as a mom and just caring for my planet and having, my faith connections to, I think that's a responsibility that we have. My hope is somebody can get us excited about our planet and our country and being humans again, instead of these cartoon characters sometimes that we have to vote for. It's like, who are you? Are you a real person? Do you care? Do you have feelings? Do you have passion about things that I care about? Because, I think that the amygdala, if that is motivating us to vote, if fear is motivating us to vote, wouldn't it be nice if we could be motivated by another part of that, those deep parts of ourselves that want to care for each other? I mean, this is my podcast. We're different, and that's good. And celebrating those differences. One of the Nancy Pelosi's things that she mentioned in her speech was the e pluribus unum, out of many one. Like, that's who we are. I love that diversity. And I would love for somebody to be able to garner different types of voices around them and embody that. A polyglot would be wonderful, because I think that does embody that type of person. I think white men are wonderful. I'm married to one, I'm raising two, but it would be nice to have somebody who wasn't. A woman would be wonderful. Person of color, both, a Latina. I was excited to see Nevada elect La Senadora. That was a very close race, but Catherine Cortez Masto was able to pull it off.
Yeah.
And I just have a lot of hope for the future. And I would love to see us usher in and not be afraid that whoever gets put up in the Democratic seat against maybe a potential Donald Trump would have to be somebody more moderate. I'd like to see us get a little more excitement there, to be excited about who we vote for.
Yeah. No, it's I was sort of surprised at the pushback against Trump's announcement. I was sort of surprised that it was anticlimactic, even from among the throngs of his longtime fans. So there was some green shoots in the lack of excitement around the announcement, the lack of surprise around the announcement, the lack of enthusiasm around the announcement. So I just don't find it newsworthy whatsoever. What I will find newsworthy is when someone else in the Republican Party announces, and who that will be. A lot of folks are talking about the governor in Florida, DeSantis.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it's somebody like Josh Hawley, for some reason, came to mind. I think it's someone who is trying to distinguish himself, someone who fancies himself to be a maverick, but at the same time, even Trumpier than Trump at times. And just
Larry Hogan.
Well, so there are Republican possibilities that I would advocate for. I would love to see if a Larry Hogan ran. I would love to see if a Liz Cheney ran. I would love to see.
Yeah, a lot of people want Liz Cheney.
Yeah. Well, okay. I didn't mention this, but I have this. It's like a 1% of 1% chance, but Liz Cheney as House Speaker.
Ooh, yeah. No, they're not going to do it. They're
not going to do it.
Hakeem Jeffries, and he's great. So.
Well, here's the why it's still just, it's not 0%. It's 1% of 1%. Is that there is still a small contingency in the Republican Party that just will not vote for Kevin McCarthy, regardless. They just won't line up. And there's various reasons for that. Some of them are, I think MTG did line up, but somebody like Matt Gaetz still isn't lining up. But there's still another small contingency from the Problem Solvers Caucus that I could see. So, say a half a dozen Republicans saying, yeah, I will vote for a Republican, and the Republican is named Liz Cheney. The trick is to get all of the Democrats in the House to line up behind her. So like I said, it's not a 0% chance, but a 1% of a 1% chance. But that's one way. Can you imagine if Nancy Pelosi handed the gavel to Liz Cheney and then to watch Kevin McCarthy? May it be.
As long as they don't try to get Trump to be the speaker. I mean,
oh gosh.
Because you don't have to be a member of Congress to be the speaker.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
If he really wanted to make news, his announcement last Tuesday would have been, I'm running for speaker, and I'm running for president, and I'm running for secretary of state for all of the states all at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. With the hands and the...
It would be huge.
Yeah. Huge, bigly. All right. So last question before we get to some business. The three of us also happen to be Christians. We've already talked a little bit about this. Have you been having any conversations in the church about the results of the election and what's to come? What kind of vibe are you getting for how folks in church are responding to it? My co-host, Pastor Josh, I go to his church. So it's it's a home church. So River City Underground, we meet in people's homes. So it's a real small community, type of people. So, and there's people that we agree on stuff and some things we don't agree on, but I don't think we've got any extremists in our church or anything like that. We meet tomorrow, so I guess we'll know. Because wait, the midterms were this week. Was it this week or last week? I can't remember what week.
November 8th. It was 10 days ago.
Okay, yeah. So last Saturday, we didn't really talk too much about the election. So I don't really have a whole lot to add there.
I'm in a house church too, a micro church. I was a pastor in a mega church, and that was not a good experience for that particular one. I'm not saying generally about that, but just that particular situation. But my husband and I started a micro church with people from that mega church that had a lot of bad experiences. Cool. And it's a beautiful community. I did micro church in Indonesia under Islamic law because that was kind of our only option. I grew up in Venezuela in small micro churches as well. But I will say, we did discuss the Georgia race. Oh. And we're in California, so I think we're mostly all on the same page. But I think, several of us were, concerned that this particular candidate was getting as many Georgians to vote for them as there were. And I think as people of faith, we found it particularly disturbing at the thought that somebody like that could be in the highest levels of our government, having said some of the things he said and done some of the things that he's done. And I think how it also ties into Trump and how we experienced him. And people of faith who understand, Genesis and the way God created man and woman in God's own image, and to treat image bearers as women the way that he has treated them is highly concerning. We're talking half of our nation, half of our world. How is he going to treat them? And potentially not just other women, but if that's his posture toward image bearers at all, maybe toward men, how is he going to treat and how is he going to vote for policies that really concerned us in terms of, how you treat people in your personal life has to reflect how you're going to vote and how you're going to power play. Politics is dirty, and we want it to be cleaner. And this doesn't seem like the right direction as people of faith.
It's really funny because, how is it Herschel Walker is garnering the evangelical vote when there's a pastor running? I mean, we haven't really discussed this, and I don't want to take us down this rabbit hole, but it all ties into this sort of Christian nationalism thing, where people are worshiping the party versus worshiping God, and it's really, really, I don't know, it's really disconcerting for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot in the Bible about that. I'm reading Jeremiah right now, and there's some crazy stuff that gets said. And I just preached in Oakland on Sunday about Amos 5, let justice roll down like a river. I was asked to speak on social justice, that passage in particular, and about women and social justice. And God says some pretty strong things, like, I don't want to hear your songs, your worship songs. Don't bring your offerings, because you are not caring for, you are oppressing people, and I don't want anything to do with you. And that's some scary stuff. So I think when our churches are blaring these loud worship songs and fog machines and, beautiful lyrics and amazing sounds, and passing offering plates, if God is turning away from that, because we don't care about the widows and the orphans, the single moms, the immigrants bringing their babies. I mean, if we don't care about the moms we're now asking to have children that were assaulted, 10-year-old girls who have been assaulted, that we're saying need to continue to have this child in her body when she is at risk to give birth at that age. Wow. I just think that God has some serious stuff to say about it. And it makes me shudder to look at Georgia in light of that.
We spoke with this guy, Andrew Gagné, who's sort of like this expert on New Apostolic Reformation and Christian nationalism. And, one of the questions I asked him was about, why are all these Christians flocking to Trump? And, his explanation was, a lot of it has to do with prophecy, specifically touted by folks like Lance Wallnau and others. And, he said, the way it's told is that Lance Wallnau was reading his Bible, got to Isaiah 45, something about Cyrus, and connected the dots for Isaiah 45, 45th president, and made sort of this connection between Trump as sort of the new modern day Cyrus. And we were just like, whoa, that's crazy. So it was just a couple of days ago, I texted Pastor Josh. Does
that writer, by the way, know that Isaiah, whoever it was that was writing down that scroll, didn't write chapter 45? 45 didn't have anything to do with it.
And that America was nowhere in his brain.
Right.
Well, it was funny. So I texted Pastor Josh a couple of days ago, and I was like, hey, you should read Isaiah 47, because if you're going to stick with this sort of this train of thought, Isaiah 47 doesn't say a whole lot of great things about the next president if it's Trump. So he read, he's like, dude, he's like, this is amazing.
It is amazing. The if I only remember one thing in these conversations, especially when we start getting to scripture, the only thing I want to remember is, that's interesting, let's keep reading. It's amazing. So when somebody's trying to make some this point, this really profound point, they think is really, really profound, that's interesting. I want to consider that. Let's keep reading, because if we keep reading, the truth will set you free. And this stuff
everywhere.
It's crazy. So I want to allow that to sit and let that be the last word. Really robust conversation. And I just enjoy hanging out with both of you. So before we go, tell us how we can find each of you. Lori, A World of Difference, and Will, Faithful Politics, and all the great work you're both doing. Lori, you first.
Thank you. Well, this has just been an honor. I loved this conversation with the two of you, Corey and Will. This has been a lot of fun for me. You can find me at A World of Difference podcast. I'm on Twitter for now. Let's see. I'm not leaving, but who knows what'll happen. I'm at Lori ADBR on Twitter, and then AWODPOD is the podcast on Twitter. I'm on Instagram and Facebook with both Lori Adams Brown and A World of Difference on both of those. And you can find me at loriadamsbrown.com. I'd love for you to listen and engage. We're all about being different and making a difference together.
Awesome. Will, where can we find you?
Yeah. So kind of to Lori's point, if Twitter goes down, you can find me on Craigslist. And if
I have a listing in the yellow pages, you can find me in the.
As long as you're not a murderer.
Yeah, so just wait until that big old book comes around and you can look me up. Our website is just Faithful Politics Podcast. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter, Faithful Politic with a K at the end. And we also have a Facebook group that we like to announce who our guests are and give our listeners a chance to ask questions. So like if we have, somebody that is an expert in this, then we like to just engage with our audience. And then we also like to get recommendations and suggestions. So we have a YouTube channel as well. You can find us there and help us out.
Awesome. And we'll be sure to put a bunch of links in the show notes so you can find Lori Adams Brown, Will Wright, my pals. As always, if you dig what we're doing here, please hit that subscribe button, leave a review and comments wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend about Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other. We're easier to recommend than ever. It's www.politicsandreligion.us. And remember that www.politicsandreligion.us. Now go talk some politics and religion with gentleness and respect, and have a great week. Thank you for joining us today. If you dig what we're doing here, it is super easy to follow us. You can go to our site, politicsandreligion.us. That's with the and spelled out, A-N-D. Politicsandreligion.us. And we're on all the socials, at TP and R Pod. TP and R Pod for Talking Politics and Religion Pod. And here's a big way you can support us, by becoming one of our patrons. You can even become a producer or executive producer of our program and have a lot more say in who we bring on, the kinds of questions we explore, or just help us keep the lights on. But mostly, we really appreciate you giving us a listen. So for the whole team here at Talking Politics and Religion Without Killing Each Other, thanks for hanging out with us. We'll be back in a few days to do our little part in Tikkun Olam.